Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and today I will be showing you how to connect these shaded motif squares. I showed you how to crochet these in the video previous to this one. If you are watching this and you don't know how to crochet this pattern and you really want to crochet it, the link will be down below to the previous video to this one. And today I will be showing you how to connect these squares row by row instead of joining as you go. Joining as you go is to just sew square by square. So let's say you start off with five squares in one row. You'll just keep adding on top as you go. But for me, I like to just do row by row. I just sew each square to the desired length that I want, and I'll keep doing that. And then once I have the desired height of my blanket, I'll just sew them all together as a row. It's much easier that way, and it's much faster. The joining as you go, it's very time consuming, and I don't like that. So for the sake of the video, I just sewed just 4 squares as an example. So let's begin. Okay, so for today's video, you are going to need a yarn needle to sew your squares together and to sew in any ends that you will have, and then scissors. And then you're going to need the squares that you are going to be sewing together. And the way that I am going to show you how to sew these squares together, it's very easy, very beginner friendly, and it actually doesn't look like you sewed it because there's no ridges. I noticed when I used to sew these not the normal way, but the way that I had taught myself to sew squares together, I always had ridges. And on YouTube, I don't know where I found this video, but on YouTube I found this video, or several videos like this, to show you how to sew in the edges. Okay, so take your coordinating yarn that was for your last row here. Mine is going to be gray, so I pre-cut some of my gray yarn, and I always do this. I always pre-cut a long strand so it's easier for me. Okay, so you're going to need to take your yarn needle and just thread your yarn through the eye, like so. You can either leave it like this, or you could tie it to keep it from coming out of the eye. And this is how I found it to be easy, the easiest to sew your squares together. Now you're going to want to make sure that you're not sewing on the side where it's the finished side, the right side. You're going to want to sew on the wrong side. So this is what the wrong side looks like. And I'm going to put my needle through the first stitch here. I don't start from here, I start from here. find it's the easiest way to sew, to start your sewing. So I just go like this, and I do the same on to your other square that you're going to sew together. And then what I like to do is to have a little bit of a tail so I can sew it in later, and I just tie it. The video that I had watched on here, it didn't do that, but I find doing this makes it so much easier. And I just sew in the other tails in later. So we're going to do a crisscross type of sewing. So you're going to go back onto the side, put your yarn through, and then go back to this square on top here and just sew underneath the V-stitches. And that will create a flawless non-ridge sewing, and it'll look beautiful, and it will look like you hadn't even sewed them together. I'm going to do this a couple more times, and then I'll stop the video and come to the end here and show you how I finish off. Okay. So you keep doing this crisscross sewing until you reach the end of your squares. And before you keep going, you should tighten them a little bit and to give them a tug, so that once you're done and you try to tighten it, it won't be too loose or too tight. So when you tighten your stitches together, so you tighten like that, right? You just want to loosen it up a little bit so that it doesn't look so bunched up or too loose or too tight. It has to be at an even tightness so it doesn't come undone or stretch out later. Okay, I'll do a few more, and then I'll stop the video. Okay, do a couple more, and then I'll show you how to tighten it up again. So then you tighten it up. You see that? You don't want that. You want to loosen it up so that it's like this. Okay, so then I will come back and I'll come back and show you how to finish off, and then off camera I'll do these two and I'll show you how I connect all four together. Okay? So I will come back. Okay, so I am close to the end here, and I always start off sewing my squares together like this, but then when I get to the end here, I found out that it's easier to turn your work this way from right to left. So I'm right here, and I just will continue on the exact same way that we had done in the beginning. And this is very, very easy. Okay, almost done. And then once you reach the end, what you're going to want to do is to tighten up your stitching and just loosen it up. And this is what the wrong side should look like. And this is what the right side should look like. And as you can see, there is no ridging. There's no seam. It's very seamless. And that's what I like about this sewing. So now what you're gonna wanna do is, what I like to do is I like to go and stick my yarn needle through the first V-stitch here on this side. Doesn't really matter which side it is, but I always pick this side for some reason when I end. And I like to put my yarn through this little loop that I created and tighten it. And then what I like to do is go here randomly and do the same thing that I did. I put my yarn needle and the thread in the middle of this loop here, and I just slowly tighten it. I had already made a blanket like this, and I did the exact same thing with that blanket, and I find that the way that I'm doing it, by tightening it off like this, works really well, because I just washed that blanket and it stayed intact. So then now you're going to want to weave in some of your yarn on your needle. You're just going to want to weave in through the stitching. You're going to want to do this one way and then back the other way from where you had come. So you can go down by that much, pull the yarn through, and then come back this way to make sure that the tail isn't gonna come undone. And then you're gonna want to take your scissors and just snip off the excess yarn and tug, and there it is. And I will quickly just show you how I sew in these ends. I'll show you one. The same way that you do on the other side. Just go through the stitches here to hide it. So you go one way, then tug a little bit and go the other way. Go back the other way to ensure that it's not going to go anywhere. And then just snip off the excess, give it a little bit of a tug, and there you go. I will sew in these ends here, and then I will come back and I'll show you how to connect these four together. Okay, so I have my four squares in twos. Now, of course, if you are going to be making a very larger blanket, you're going to need more squares, and then you're going to need to repeat this process many more times, because I like to, after I crocheted all my squares together, I like to just sew each square like this individually in the length that I want my blanket to be. So let's say I want my blanket to be 5 squares long. The first row, I'd individually sew 5 squares, and I'll keep doing that and doing that until I have the amount of 5 squares of how many rows that I want. So for just an example, and for the sake of this video so it's not so long, I just made this example piece just 2 rows of 2 squares. and I thought that and felt that this was the appropriate size for an example on how to sew the way that I sew these squares together. Okay, so once you sewed in all of your tails in, you can either continue to sew with the same amount of yarn, the same length of yarn that you had after you sewed in the squares. I usually cut a pretty good length of yarn to sew in these squares. So I usually have a lot of yarn left over even after I'm done with my squares. Like if I were to do this with 5 squares, I usually have a lot of yarn afterwards, because I like to make sure I have a lot of yarn so I don't have to stop, tie, and then grab more yarn and do that. So what I like to do is I like to grab my 2 rows together that I have chosen to sew together and match up the exact same stitch here and on the same stitch on the other square. And just do what you did when you were connecting the squares together. Okay. And always make sure that you have quite a bit of a tail, so it's easier for you to sew in the tail later. Okay, so we're just going to continue on the same way that we've been doing with these squares. So this is the exact same process when you were connecting the squares. We're just connecting them together in rows. So I'm gonna do this a couple more times, and as you can see, my yarn has become a lot longer because I felt like the remaining yarn that I had on my yarn needle was kind of short. So I just grabbed more yarn and just made it longer. Okay, so you're gonna wanna always tug on your work on the stitches as you're sewing and continue along the way. Let's do a couple more together and then I will stop the video. So all you're doing is just going in a crisscross motion on the top stitches to make this seam very seamless. Okay, so just tighten your work and tug on it gently, and I will come back to you once I am right here in these 4 corners, and I'll show you how I connect these corners together, and then after that I'll show you how I fasten off. Okay, so I stopped at the end of this 3 double crochet here, and now I am going to sew in this corner here. So what I like to do in these corners here is to connect these chain 3 that made up our corners first. So I'll go into this side because I ended on this side, so now I gotta go into this chain 1 space, or this chain 1 here, and then connect it to this chain 1 here. And I'll do that on all 3 chain 3 that made up our corner. And you're just doing this the same way that you've been sewing in all the way along here. So then now you have this part here and then this part here. So what I like to do, since I'm on this side, I'll just stick my needle right there. Doesn't really matter as long as you're on the bottom here. And then I'll just do the exact same thing. And I'll connect it like that. And then I'll do it a couple more times. Okay, this is what it looks like. And then you're just going to do the exact same thing that you did on the other side. Just go through on the top stitches on both sides. Okay. And then once you've reached the stitches here to the first set of 3 double crochets, you're going to start back the way that you did in the beginning. I'll do a couple of these to show you how I'm sewing them together. And make sure you're always tugging and tightening your stitches so they don't look so loose. I'll do 2 more. Okay, so just continue along until you reach about here, and I'll show you how to fasten off again. Okay, so once you reached the end here, you can either turn your work like how I'm doing or just keep on continuing on. But for the sake of the video, I'm going to turn my work so you can see it a lot better since my table is kind of small. So you're just going to continue sewing each V-stitch on top in the last set of these 3 double crochets. Okay, so then you do the same thing that you did in the beginning of the video on how to sew in the ends. So I'll do that first, and then randomly in the middle here, I'll do two of these little knots. Just like so. And then I'll just sew in some of the bit of the tail to make sure that this is going to stay. And go back up, whichever way you prefer. Okay, and then all you have to do is grab your scissors and snip off the rest of your yarn. And what I like to do is like to save this yarn here for more, to sew in more squares of the same color. Okay, and what I did here so that it doesn't look so bunched up in this specific corner here in the middle here, I always, when I tightened it up, I always loosened it as I went. And I didn't show it, but before you fasten off and tie your end here, always make sure that you're going through and loosening it up a little bit so that it looks like this. So that's what this looks like. So here is a full-size view of these squares together, and this is what it looks like, and this is what it will look like when you have all of your squares together on which however length you are making your blanket. Now the free pattern that I got from Michaels, and I'll leave it on down below in the description box again for this video. They didn't do a border. They just left it like this, just like that, all the way around. They didn't do a border, but if you want to see a border, please comment down below if you want to see how I do a border for this particular pattern. And please like this video too, and also please hit that subscribe button so you can keep up and see more of my projects. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.